Thank you for that beautiful introduction and pronunciation of my name. What an elegant talk. Thank you so much. And I feel like I'm going to be analysed for ticking off the errors. But good morning, everybody. And it's wonderful to see so many friends, old friends and new friends. We're such a wonderful community here that I feel really welcome. What I'm going to do now is stands in contrast to what you just heard. Rather than a relatively small number of very elegant principles, I'm going to blast you with a whole lot of information. And I'm not expecting anyone to memorise any of this, but my purpose today is to help people have ready answers for the things that you want to argue about on the internet, as we all do. I'm not going to help you correct grammar, I'm going to help you correct scientific fact, and particularly in the medical sciences. So in half an hour, I can't give you the evidence-based answer to everything, but we'll try and cover most things today. So there's a reason for describing myself. I went to medical school, I did a number of years of specialty training, and I've been in practice in medicine for quite a number of years. As you can see, I was born at an early age. So to a lot of people on the internet, that means that I'm completely brainwashed by my education. And the other reason that I'm here to share a lot of information is that in my job, I was obliged to learn about research methods, to perform research, to help people conduct research. And because of my job and the things that I do, I've got access to a wide range of journals, which means that when I correct people on the internet, I'm arrogant and condescending. So the reason I've shown you all that is not to show that I'm some special snowflake. I'm hopeless in economics and physics and a whole range of other things, but I happen to be pretty good in the area that I'm trained in and experienced in, which most of us here, because you're logical, would think, well, just as well, that probably I wouldn't be very good at my job if I hadn't learned it over so many years. Going forward, there's a special way of pressing. No? Hard. Is there anyone here that doesn't do this? No, I must have missed one. How and why? How did I get involved in this? I used to be involved in medical regulation. And there was a time, a lot of you will know, when the anti-vaccination network had a warning issued by the Healthcare Complaints Commission in New South Wales. I heard about that, I started reading, and then I got involved with people from Stop the AVN, and further on, Friends of Science in Medicine, which I'm still actively involved with. And what I found, like the rest of you, is that we're a huge community and there's a lot of networking and overlap between us. And so I ended up like that. Hard press again. Hard and repeatedly. Oops, that's got too many connotations. No, I've turned it off. Okay, so this is the sort of response that I've had over the years because I use my knowledge and education. That I'm an embarrassment, that I'm a troll. But I particularly like this bottom one, that because Sue's able to respond to tweets and other social media comments within moments of them being posted at nearly any time of day or night, how could I possibly be a real doctor? Well, it's obvious that firstly, emergency physicians don't work 9 to 5, but maybe it's because I can think and write fairly quickly. Okay, this is what we're going to do for the next 25 minutes. There are no bits of paper. If you want to play bingo along with me, take a photo of the screen and tick them up as you go. I've got my bingo pieces. Let's go. Firstly, do you all know about bingo nomenclature? It's not just legs 11. Oh, go back. You all got it? Okay. This is another bit accompanying our previous discussion about nomenclature. There's some beautiful language associated with the numbers in bingo that some of you may have heard. So let's go. Okay. You won't find it surprising that a lot of these will be about vaccination. So how many of you heard I'm not anti-vax, I'm pro-choice? It's actually our community who've made the term anti-vax pejorative, which I actually, even though you might think that there are reasons why that's arrogant and condescending, a lot of us will agree that the idea of going against established population health strategies is something to be criticised. So when you hear someone say that, one of the things to think about is that if you're pro-individual choice for vaccination, you are anti-vax. Even if you used to vaccinate before and you argue against vaccination now, you're an anti-vaxxer. Because if you don't promote community immunity, then you're working against the intention of community vaccination. I'm pro-safe vaccines. There isn't anything 100% safe in life, even breathing and eating. My doctor should sign a guarantee, or so should your lunch provider and your bus driver. And where there's a risk, there must be a choice. When we live in a society that's regulated, we have to accept the rules of the society. Many of you will have seen this one, and I won't go through all of the arguments, but one of the most common arguments used online is, if your kids are vaccinated and they're immune, why are you worried about my kids? And all of the arguments are there. But one of the things I've noticed over the years with this is it's completely resistant to any sort of explanation. So in my arrogant and condescending way, I'll often say, here's the answer. And now that you've read this, you won't need to ask that question anymore, will you? And you can imagine how much effect that has. Okay, oh, I keep on forgetting I'm drawing these numbers. Pretend I'm drawing the numbers. 6. Half a dozen. Isn't it magical? I love this one because I went to medical school. Firstly, nutrition and then vaccination. There's this illusion in the community that has never been near a medical school that there's a topic called nutrition or a topic called vaccination, and you go to school one day and it's up on the board, vaccination, and that's the tutorial you have for your whole life. Think about what nutrition means, how food and liquids nourish our body. We learn everything from day one of anatomy, how your salivary glands work, down to all of the micronutrients, all of the metabolic pathways. There isn't a single lesson in medical school about any simplistic topic. And the same thing goes with vaccination. There isn't a lesson that you turn up to one day this is about vaccines. It's about how the whole body works. And that's just an illustration of how simplistic some people's understanding of medical training is. Sweet 16. Anyone heard this? Fructose is poison. It goes straight to the liver and makes fat. Not really true. So obviously fructose isn't evil because our fruits and vegetables contain it. It doesn't stimulate insulin release. So what? Glucose stimulates insulin release. And it's, as you can see there, if you're interested in metabolic pathways, fructose can go to triglycerides, but it can also become glycogen, which is a storage molecule for glucose. And that pathway is bidirectional, and it depends on how far away from a meal you are and what you've eaten. So there isn't any simplistic poison amongst the natural food groups. What's next? I have to pretend, don't I? 5 man alive. Now, there's a couple of holy cows in this talk. The first one is the mantra about infant feeding, that I believed, and most of us will believe, that it makes a big difference what you feed an infant. The reality is that in wealthy societies where you have clean water and you have plenty of good quality formula, it makes very little difference what you feed infants. And the fact is that what the studies are showing as they're increasingly sophisticated is that breastfeeding is actually a surrogate measure for socioeconomic status, which is a very strong indicator of health and outcome. So even though arguing against mother's milk seems a paradoxical thing to do, the research actually gives us the right answer. So feeding a baby and loving it is the best thing that you can do. Next one. You all know Legs 11, don't you? Here's another one, just while we're smashing holy cows. Oh, is that a mixed metaphor? I should ask our linguist. So, natural birth. This is an example of what we see a lot in our society of spectrum bias. Because we don't see graveyards full of mothers and babies anymore, we think that the birth outcomes that we have now are the way nature intended it. But that's far from true. It's the fact that we have modern medicine and modern obstetrics and midwifery based on science that birth is now a relatively safe thing, and maternal death in childbirth is almost unheard of. You'll hear it in the national news. The caesarean rate, there isn't an ideal one. It just depends on what suits the individual or the society. And it's really important to know that even in modern societies with risk-out procedures, home birth kills 3 times as many babies as equal risk hospital birth. So if you're interested in that area, look that up. Particularly follow the work of Amy Tutur, the skeptical obstetrician, who's a retired obstetrician who presents a lot of the evidence in this area. 13, unlucky for some. This point is about training and expertise, and many of you here will have your own area of expertise and specific knowledge, which I don't share, but hopefully that you have much better than me. What I find gets argued all the time by people presenting these arguments is that we're brainwashed, that we're funded by industry, particularly in medicine. Doctors can't disagree because they'll get deregistered. That's actually not true, that people get deregistered for practicing poorly or dishonestly. But the interesting thing is that if there's one doctor that happens to agree with what the person's saying, then they're an exception to the rule. For example, not a doctor wellness guru is a real hero. Doesn't happen to be brainwashed by their training. Number 40. I don't know, why is 40 life begins? I don't know that one. End of gestation, maybe? Science doesn't know everything. Well, science doesn't know anything really. Science isn't an entity, it's a method of investigation. And how often have we heard, well, doctors don't know because they used to tell people to smoke, they prescribed Vioxx and thalidomide. When thalidomide was first around, there was no such science as teratogenesis or poisoning of infants in the womb. That's all happened since then because the science has developed through medical endeavour and medical science, not through nonsensical methods. And this idea of the ancient wisdom, life is actually better. We no longer have all of those features of ancient societies that we quite conveniently forget about when we idealise what ancient societies used to be like. But ancient societies, unless you're amongst the hugely privileged, were very brutal. Next one, 33, dirty knee, all the threes, fish and chips and peas. Must be so exciting when you actually go and play bingo. This point I want to make quite firmly, that because now published research is accessible to everybody just with a click of your internet, people have misunderstood what peer-reviewed research means. Firstly, the peer review that it takes to get yourself published in a journal, I'm a peer reviewer. It means 2 or 3 people read your paper, make some suggestions and say it's suitable for that particular journal. And you recommend to the editor, yes, this one should be published or they should have another look at their statistics or whatever, it does not mean that the research is valid, because the very purpose of publication is to put that paper and your methodology out to an informed public. The reason that publishing happens is that so all of us can read in our own area and pull the paper apart and say, is this valid? Is the methodology right? Should we implement it? Does it fit with the evidence that we already know? That's what analysing papers is all about. And as you can see there, being published in a journal doesn't mean too much at all. Moving along, I'll go a little bit faster. 29, rinse and shine, that's cute. I need to point this one out, that for all that we criticise Big Pharma, and yes, big industry do unethical things, whether it's airbags in cars, whether it's emission controls that are done badly, all big industry has a profit motive and they all do things badly at times. But look at these two groups. What we call in Australia boiron, or I guess it's warong. Have you heard of the homeopathic so-called manufacturer? They do all that diluting and succussing. I'll show you in a moment how much of a scam that is. And then there's, if you think doctors have a vested interest in prescribing pharmaceuticals, the so-called natural therapy company Metagenics actually signs up providers who recommend and then directly sell you products. So there's no greater ethics in that so-called natural group. Have a look at this one. Homeopathy Plus is an Australian company and service. 100 sucrose pills cost you $16. They're literally little pills of sugar that cost you $1 per kilo in Coles. And see this little bottle, a simplex. Simplex means there's one thing that's not in there as opposed to a whole lot of things not in there. 20 mils of water at $18 costs you $900 per litre. And I couldn't avoid doing a quick comparison to show that you could buy a bottle of Penfolds Grange for about the same amount. Lucky 7, Eastern versus Western. I'm not very good at doing the bingo call, am I? There isn't any Eastern or Western science. There's science. All people of the world have a propensity to be scientific, the same as they have a propensity to be superstitious and illogical. Ancient China wasn't any purer than any other part of the ancient world. There are lots of awful things happening, there are illogical things happening, because the ancients only had their human senses to do discovery with. We've got technology now, so it's not that people were of any particular different disposition, it's that they just didn't have the benefit we now have to measure things. 19, goodbye teens. So-called, do you ever hear medicine being criticised as so-called allopathic? What's allopathic? Nothing much. It's the opposite of homeopathic. So Samuel Hahnemann said, like cures like, homeo meaning the same, pathic meaning the origin of disease, and allopathic meant that you battle the disease with the opposite. But in fact, conventional medicine isn't any kind of pathic, it's multimodal. It's everything from lancing boils to speech pathology. So there's no allopathic medicine. 31, get up and run. Scientists used to say, and we've heard this during these couple of days, haven't we, that of course knowledge evolves over time. It very rarely goes backwards and it almost never gets reversed, but we become more sophisticated in our understanding of the world over time. And the reason that we need the scientific method is because humans are notorious at linking to events that are not causally related. You know, all of the myths about in pregnancy, if you ate a strawberry, your kid's born with a strawberry birthmark. That sort of stuff is typical. And if you haven't already been to the site of spurious correlations, I commend it to you. this one, the fact that drownings caused by accident in a fishing boat correlates almost 100% with visitors to Tokyo Disneyland. Next. Oh, it was a signal I was supposed to get another bingo thing out. Number 3, cup of tea. Vaccines didn't save us, sanitation and nutrition did. Well, death certainly went down as life improved and medical care got better, but I had measles, and I dare say a few people here got measles. For those of you who weren't alive in the 1960s, this is what Australia looked like then. They had paved streets. We had paved streets and motor vehicles and lots of sanitation and good clean food and air. This isn't what stopped measles, it was vaccination. I'll go a bit more quickly through a few. As I said before, the reason that I'm throwing so much stuff at you is pick the ones that are particular hobby horses of yours so that you have the answers to those particular discussions. Again, conventional medical training. I covered some of those points before, so we won't go through that again. Should I stand down there? Anyone know why 44 is droopy drawers? There must be, someone's written a book about it somewhere. No, going forward.
Pointed at the projector.
Okay. A few things about diet. I don't know if we've got dietitians in the audience, but their profession gets slammed all the time. Just the main point I want to make there is that everyone says we got fatter after they told us to eat less fat. Well, the fact is we never did eat less fat. We'd just eaten more of everything. Water fluoridation, never heard that one? That's all dumbing us down. Everything can be toxic if you have it too much. Now, fluoride is a natural element. The reason that we know about fluoride toxicity is those areas of India and China that have enormously high water fluoride levels. And those people get true fluoride toxicity. There has not been a case anywhere in the world ever of true fluoride toxicity from regulated town water. And the other point I want to make here is that population health measures are designed for people who don't have good dental hygiene. Let me go forward a little bit faster. Vaccine ingredients. All of these arguments have been debunked. Doesn't matter how often you debunk them, they still come up. But the purpose of debunking them in public sites is that so other people who are reading can hear the arguments. Now I need to go through a couple of these. How can I advance? Maybe I'll come down here. I don't have time to go through every point of these, but as I said before, the point of showing them to you is so that you can pick out in your particular hobby horses what the areas of actual information are. Do the study, vax versus non-vax, it's been done. They many times have been done. There isn't a single study measuring health because there's no single measure of health. Natural medicine, we've got to remember that all of the ancients only had their own human senses to think about science with. The ancient scientists were philosophers. They couldn't measure things. Chiropractic training and practice, I'll let you read some of that for yourself. Particularly chiropractors do 5 years of a university study. Well, the answer to that is naturopaths get a Bachelor of Health Science. How long you spend at uni doesn't mean anything. Number 10 was set as Prime Minister of the Times Den, so it's ScoMo's Den. This one I have to say slowly, a serious take-home message, because it's very easy to become sneering and critical of people who take an anti-vaccination view. Something that I've learnt from being in that space over many years now is that there are struggling families who need an external locus of blame for the struggles of their children. These people are vulnerable to the anti-vax brigade because they pull them into a community, just like we're a community, and they validate their concerns. So when we're doing this arguing, we also need to be empathetic and temper our sneering with humanity and understanding. Now, one more last draw. I had to do this one. And you might say that an analogy is not very good if you have to explain it. That's a thin veil I have to explain it. It's a thinly veiled reference. Neurosurgery is not rocket science. I don't know, how many of you are getting this? I can't say the person's name. Neurosurgery is just a bit of surgery. There's plastic surgery, there's all sorts of different kinds of surgery. Yes, the stakes are high, but cognitive specialties also have high stakes. And there are lots of paediatric neurosurgeons who save children's lives every day, but they're in the public hospital system, not being celebrities on TV. Just saying. Some references which all of you can find online. Thank you very much. Go forth and debunk.